What is up, YouTube? Hello, Party Parrots. Today is patch day, which means we have a entire brand new season of cards. March's 1 million BC Avengers season is dropping in Marvel Snap, and this is probably the most excited I've ever been for a Marvel Snap season because some of these cards have the craziest effects I have ever seen. We have multiple 6 drops coming to the game, multiple game start effects, including a brand new ability or game effect or something called legendary that we'll be going over here shortly. But really quickly, I want to give the disclaimer that this is all data mine. So all of this is subject to change. In fact, 2 of the cards we're going to be going over were previously gone over in earlier videos, but have completely changed their abilities. So I want to cover those cards too, and again, get ahead of that and saying that this is not official. Any number of these cards could have power tweaked or cost tweaked, or they could get entirely new abilities or not even come out at all. We've seen that happen in the past. So without further ado, let's break it down, starting with what is said to be, or data mined to be, the season pass card of Agamotto. Now, you might be saying, Parrot, I've never heard of the 1 million BC Avengers. I'm not going to know any of these characters. Like, who even are these? Well, that's the great thing about this season is a lot of these characters will have characters, or a lot of this season will have characters that you know, just kind of reimagined in different forms. For instance, if you're aware of Doctor Strange with his necklace, the Eye of Agamotto, well, we have coming Agamotto. And so on, if you are aware of Phoenix or Phoenix Force, we have Firehair coming into the game, who's kind of an early incarnation of the Phoenix Force, and that's what a lot of these cards are going to be. So I think there still will be a lot of characters to like, even if you're not as familiar with the 1 million BC Avengers. But let's actually break down Agamotto. Now, we don't know a ton about this card because while we have almost his entire text, he seems to be a 6/12 with the at the start of game shuffle. It looks like 5 spells into your deck. So he looks like a big 6 drop that is going to be shuffling cards into your deck. Think Thanos mixed with kind of Nico with the kind of spells effect. And if you see up there, since we don't know what these spells actually do, we have the images of Icon, the bolts of Balthok, Flames of the Faltine, Temporal Manipulation. They don't seem to have any power. It's unclear if these maybe you play them and they like do something and go away, or how these cards will actually work. We don't know. We still have to wait for that to be data mined, but it seems like this is going to be the season pass card. It seems like he's going to be shuffling spells into your deck, and that is just super exciting because cards like Nico, Thanos, I think are some of the best and most interesting cards in Marvel Snap. So I'm super eager to get my hands on Agamotto. No star rating because we're not quite sure without his spells how good he's going to be, but I'm very excited for this season pass card. Then we have coming out in the Spotlight caches is Eson, and this card seems insane. He is a 6/13, so pretty good stats for a 6 drop with the ability Legendary, period. So that seems to be its own new thing. We'll break that down in a second. And at the start of the game, if all of your cards have different powers, give them +2 power. So this seems to be an entire deck wide buff. Now, what does Legendary mean? I think, and we don't know, this is just having played other card games like Magic in the past. I think what they're going to do is realize that a card like Eson with cards like Thanos or cards like Erishim, maybe even Agamotto, although he wasn't data mined to have legendary, that are like doing these really big effects. Probably shouldn't be played together. And so if you're a Thanos Erishim enjoyer, I would say maybe start counting your days here because if they do bring this ability, and it is what I think you're only going to have one legendary card in your deck. So you can't play like Eson, give all of your cards +2 power, and have Thanos shuffling the stones into your deck, and have Erishim shuffling 10 more cards. All of it's getting +2 power. I think they're just going to say instead you can only have one of these cards. I would guess that maybe they didn't love the interaction between Thanos and Erishim. I would guess that Thanos, Erishim, Eson are probably the 3 that I would think are going to be kind of dead ringers for this new legendary ability. If it is only one in a deck, maybe High Evo. I don't think Galactus or anything like that, but these kind of effects that really don't play nice with other really big effects like that, I could totally see being in. Now, to break down what he's actually doing, though, at the start of your game, all your cards get +2 power. I mean, that is an insane buff. I'm giving this card 5 stars. If you are able to meet those conditions, which obviously is kind of difficult, um, because you have to have different power. So if you're like, oh, well, maybe Wiccan will be really good because that has a really nice curve and that sounds great. But keep in mind, like, if your plan was to play Hawkeye Kate Bishop into a Red Guardian, well, you can't because they both have 3 power. So if you want Red Guardian, you can't have any card with 3 power. So maybe that'll kind of incentivize people to branch out, maybe cards like Spider Ham or the Hood that have kind of unique powers, Havoc, probably not Havoc, but these 0 power like Thena style effects that are just very different powers might be kind of cream of the crop in these Eson decks. So I would look out for maybe cards like Wiccan, Gilgamesh will get power for every single card you have on the board because he's going to be giving them +2 power. But all in all, I think we're going to have a ton of brewing to do with this effect. And much like Erishim, the other Celestial in the game, this card seems like he's going to be a complete game changer, going to completely change how we think about deck building when we're building Eson decks. And I mean, unlike Erishim, a 613 is nothing to sneeze at all. And because it's kind of a unique power, he won't be really hurting you. If he was a 612, well, that means no Magneto, that means no Hulk. If he's a 6'9", even, that means no Alliot, that means no Mockingbird. But the 613 power, I think, is going to be really unique for that. And so I have to give him 5 stars. I think he's probably going to be the most powerful cards of the set. So next we have coming Firehair. Firehair is a 2/2 with the ability you can move this once. When this moves, revive one of your destroyed cards here. Now, Firehair in the comics is kind of the caveman version of Phoenix Force, or the Phoenix Force inhabiting a different body. And so I think for a flavor, this card is a perfect, 5 out of 5, much like Phoenix Force bringing something back. This card gets to move and bring something back. Now, I gave it a 3 out of 5 for gameplay, and that's because we've seen this. You can move this once, be incredibly powerful. Jeff was one of the strongest cards in the game for almost a year, maybe even longer than a year. But much like Nocturne and Jeff, that effect has kind of gone down, especially as they came more in line. And so we've seen that you really need a good ability there. Something like strong stats, like when Nocturne was a 3/5, when a 5/8 was really good, we saw Vision everywhere. But now that hasn't really been played. So we need to look at, a 2/2 is not very good stats. But that ability of revive one of your destroyed cards here makes this very interesting. Now, where can you play this? And I was thinking about it and I was like, I don't think you want it in like a Phoenix Force. I don't think it's going to be good just like, oh, if they Shang me, I can move this. Like, I think if you're worried about that, you could play like Armor in your deck, especially if you're like a Surtur deck. You're probably not going to play her. And so I thought about what's the one deck that might really like this or card, and I think Misery is the perfect card to pair with this because we've seen Misery like Rock Slide decks. We've seen Misery and the Hood paired with these really strong on reveals. A lot of those decks have even played Phoenix Force just to re-trigger the on reveals, where you play a card like Korg and the Hood, and then you Misery them, do them again, and then you play Phoenix Force, do them again. Like, that is a really strong ability. And Firehair, I think, will actually might be like perfect to fit into that curve, take that kind of Phoenix Force slot. So I'm going to be interested to try it with Misery. I'm probably going to be trying this with a Thanos build. I've been playing a ton of Destroy Thanos. It's one of my favorite decks, and I think playing this Firehair, playing Misery, getting back a stone to draw another card or a hood or anything like that could be really strong. So I give it a 3 out of 5 just because of that Misery synergy, and I'm really excited for her to drop into Marvel Snap. Next up, we have coming Starbrand, who is a 6/8 with the ability at the start of the game, +2 power for each card in your deck with 10 or more power. And this card I gave 4 out of 5 stars simply because I think this card is perfectly suited for a Surtur or Scar deck. I mean, those decks, I think when you look at what Starbrand, the power it's bringing, for this card, For you to be happy to play it, it needs to be a 616, which only means you need to be running 4 cards with 10 or more power. And if you're running a Scar or Surtur deck, that means you just need a 4-drop, a 5-drop, a 6-drop, and Scar, which those decks are all pretty much already doing. I mean, you're not really going to run a Scar or a Surtur deck with less than that. And just those 4 cards makes this a 616. And that's, on par with a pretty good Red Hulk. And it's consistent. There's no waiting for your opponent to float energy or anything like that. That's just going to be a 616. And then if you look at it, this card is probably going to be regularly a 618, maybe even a 620, because a lot of those decks are running like 2 4-drops, a 5-drop, and then the 2 6-drops. Maybe they're even running like 2 4-drops, 2 5-drops, 2 6-drops in Starbrand. I don't think it's that unlikely that you can build a Starbrand kind of Surtur deck to easily put this up to like a 618, maybe even a 620. And if you've ever played like an Infinite with like War Machine out, you know how big 620 is, especially when you have a card like Surtur and Scar that you might be able to play it, a big problem with just big 6-drops, as we've kind of seen with Gore, which is a really good card regularly, a 618 or a 620. But if that's the only thing you're playing on the final turn, sometimes you just need to be able to spread out that power. And that's something that this Surtur deck can do really well, even with Starbrand, because if you have a free Scar, or even just playing Starbrand and growing that Surtur, could be enough to take it down. And so I give this card 4 out of 5. I don't think it's very versatile because I was trying to think of other decks that might have uh 4 or more cards with 10 or more power, and there really isn't a ton because most card decks that even if they do, they're cards like Blob or Gore or Hitmonkey, and it's like, yeah, they regularly get to 10 power, but they don't start. And remember, it's that at the start of your game, +2 power for each card with 10 or more power. Well, they can't get it, even that card dropping later this month, Ares isn't going to trigger Starbrand, so that does knock it down a point for me, but I still think this card is going to be really strong in those Surtur lists. And now we have Khonshu. And this is the card that I need to put a double disclaimer that this card did not have any text in the data mine. It was not linked to anything. But there was another card known as Fan Fei, who is the kind of Iron Fist, powered with the same kind of magical power that Iron Fist is in the regular Avengers. She had this effect, and I think that this effect is onto Khonshu. So what is it? So again, huge disclaimer, this could be totally wrong, but what I think this card is I believe that Khonshu, who if you don't know is the god who gives Moon Knight his power, he's the Egyptian god of the moon, he is a 2/1 with the ability when you discard this, put it back waxing and get +1 energy next turn. Now, we also saw in the data mines that there was waxing Khonshu, waning Khonshu, and full moon Khonshu. And so you might be saying, like, well, what do these effects do? We don't know what the different, what full moon Khonshu does, unfortunately. But I think that we can kind of guess here that if this is the effect for Khonshu and not Fan Fei, which I think it is, because again, it says waxing. We saw waxing Khonshu in the data mine. That this is what this is like a 2/1 that has kind of an X23 effect, at least initially, where when you discard it, the next turn you'll have +1 energy, and then when it's in your hand, it will either have different stats or maybe even a different effect. I could theorize this being like 2/1, and then waxing Khonshu is like a 2/5, and then full moon Khonshu maybe is like a 2/5 with the ability, you know, maybe like a Modoc thing where it discards your entire hand because it wants to be played in discard things. Again, I'm not sure. Maybe it's just different stats, maybe it's different effects, but it seems like it's a card where every time you discard it, it's going to come back different, potentially different effects, different stats, and that is just such a cool card to me. I had to include it in this because I haven't seen a lot of people talking about this because again, he didn't actually have any text in the data mine, but I think this is a text. And if this is what they're going for with him, one, I understand why it's not all in the data mine because it seems very complicated. But two, this could be my favorite effect in Marvel Snap of this full moon cyclical. Every time you discard it, it's much like the moon is going to be changing, waxing, waning, full moon, different powers. Maybe they're different when you play them. Super cool. Like absolutely love this idea for a discard deck. Silver Samurai and Modok would go great with Khonshu because Silver Samurai is going to hit your lowest power thing and theirs. Well, if Khonshu, if this is his right stats, will probably always be hit in a discard shell because they usually have at least 2 power, almost all of their cards. So again, I didn't give it a star rating, and it could be that I'm, pulled too many things out of the data mine. But if this is what they're shooting for, then hats off to Second Dinner because this card is so cool. For our next two cards, these are cards that were data mined to be coming out in potentially the February season, but had significant changes to their tech. So I wanted to cover them again. And starting with the most drastic one, I think, which is RedWing. Initially a 1-2 that would, on reveal, put a 1-drop in your hand and give it +2 power. It has a completely different ability. So again, data mines are always subject to change. You're never quite sure if this is going to be the final product. Most of them are, but as we can see here, they could completely change them because now it is a 3/3 with the ability the first time this moves, add a card from your hand to the old location. So, unlike previous Red Ring, which is like a bounce card, this is kind of a move, like almost ramp synergy, where it's able to pull cards out of your hand when it moves, but it does need to have another card move it. It doesn't move out on its own, which is why I think like cards like Aranya, Ghost Spider, maybe even Heimdall could be good. And then it also needs a payoff. A card like Red Hulk, big card, maybe Gore or something that this card moves into. I don't think this card is going to be super great with its current text because it both needs a payoff and it needs an enabler, and you need Red Wing, so it's kind of a 3-card combo to ramp a card onto the battlefield. Now, if you pull out an Infinite, that's going to be huge. And so maybe it will see some play, but I don't know if there's enough pieces for kind of a ramp move hybrid yet. We've seen ramp or move bounce hybrids do very well, but that's because generally move decks have done really good at being kind of low cost. You don't usually play anything more than 3 power besides maybe a Heimdall. And even then, most of the move decks now are just playing nothing with more than 3 and cards like Frigga to get more. And Red Wing seems like it would not pair well with that deck, which means I think you'd need to kind of build a whole new move thing where you have this kind of ramp payoff. And I don't know if we have all the pieces for it just yet, but maybe we will be getting those pieces shortly. So as of now, I'm not super excited for Red Wing, but I do think that it could be a key part for a future deck archetype. And for our final new card before we go into the spotlight caches, we have Cobra. And originally, this card was terrible. I gave him 1 star, and I said he'll probably see some kind of change, either a power boost or a change to his effect. And it seems like he got exactly that. He was a 3/6 that could only be played where your opponent had 1 card. Now he is a 2/3 with the activate ability of switch an enemy card here that didn't start in your opponent's deck to your side. So essentially, you will be stealing one of your opponent's cards that didn't start there. So any card against Erishim you can take. Now, notice it doesn't say like highest power, highest cost, or even like lowest power. So it's just a random card here. So is this card going to be, a meta breaking thing? I don't think so. I'm actually, I think, higher on this card than some of other people that I've heard. People are like, well, you're never going to play this in the deck because it doesn't help you out. But I could absolutely see this kind of effect being good in certain metagames. So if you're playing like a Wiccan deck and everyone starts playing Thanos, or there's a lot of Erishim out there, or you want to be able to hedge against these Victoria hands. For instance, I think if this card came out right now, it would actually be pretty good with all of the Victoria hands, kind of Mirage, Agent Coulson things that people are doing. If Loki gets a rework or even just gets more popular, then this kind of effect I could totally see being good in a couple of mid-range decks. Again, maybe like a Sarah Control deck or a Miss Marvel deck. Again, I think Wiccan could be a really good home for Cobra because it really helps your curve. maybe even a Doom 2099. Those decks want cheap cards to play out early and then have a nice curve. Well, this is a 2-drop that could potentially swing more power. And obviously, sometimes Monster Island might spawn and you get to steal their 10 power monster, which is kind of insane. So I think higher on this card than a lot of other people, but I don't think that you're going to be able to just plop them into any deck or, build around this as much as a lot of the other cards, but I still think that it could see some play. So let's break it down the actual spotlight caches now that are is data mined to be coming out in March. First, we have that week one is Eson, which I rated a 5 out of 5, along with Wiccan, who I think is also a 5 out of 5, and this variant is a 5 out of 5, and Beta Ray Bill, who I think is also a phenomenal card. This is a great week to open. If you don't have Wiccan or Beta Ray Bill, or even one of them, I think you should be absolutely saving your keys for this week. Even if you do, I mean, these are great variants, and Eson himself, I think, is going to be a must-have. So I'd be definitely saving for this week. Then we have Starbrand, Scar, and Fastos. I think this is a great week because it has Scar and Starbrand. And like I said, I don't really see Starbrand being great in decks outside of Scar. So if you're missing Scar, well, you can be getting probably two key pieces for the deck in one Scar himself and the new Starbrand. Fastos hasn't seen a ton of play. I've liked him in some Thanos shells, but overall, I think this will be a great week to open if you are or want to be playing Scar. Then we have Firehair, and Firehair is coming with Cassandra Nova and Nico Monroe. Both of these are absolute staples. Cassandra Nova and Nico Monroe see a ton of play. So if you're missing either of those, and I think this is the first time Cassandra Nova is actually going to be coming to Spotlight Caches. So this might be the first time a lot of people pick her up. And same with Nico Monroe. If you're missing her, this is a great week to be opening. And finally, we have Khonshu, Scorn, and Cersei. And I think this is another great week to be opening. Scorn, I know this is going to be her first time coming back. We'll have to wait and see what Khonshu's final abilities are. I think I pronounced that like 12 different ways, but it is Khonshu. And then Cersei sees a little bit of play. She's a lot of fun, and so I think this is a great week as well. And finally, we have a card that didn't have any text, so I didn't include him in my rankings, but it is Ghost, the First Rider. This is basically Caveman Ghost Rider, and I mean, look at him. He rides a woolly mammoth. How cool is that? So hopefully we'll be getting some abilities. He's data mined to be a 2/4, so who knows what he's going to be doing, but I'm super excited. And let me know what you are excited for. Are you as excited as I am for this season? We have 3 new 6 drops coming, tons of game start effects, a new word legendary. What do you think that's going to be? Let me know in a comment down below, and I will see you guys all in the next video.